everyone. So today's class, like I said, we mixed up the order a little bit just to give you a head start on propagating and starting your seedlings. Hopefully, some people are starting this week. But this is how we normally start the class. Usually we go through, this first class is just about how to build gardens. What are you looking for, how to build it, what kind of materials, how to make raised beds with wood or without wood, some design techniques. And then our second class, we'll get into more of how do you, plant a garden, maintain a garden, how do you, deal with that stuff. And then we'll get into like classes on pests and diseases, composting, weeds, all that different stuff. So, but this one, yeah, like I said, this one is just going to be like how we build it. And this is one of my favorite gardens. I think I've already showed this to y'all, but yeah, this is Langdon. Langdon Community Garden, where we have 7 different types of garden beds. We build them out of, this is pressure treated wood, 6x6s with a poly liner, which pressure treated is, they use micronized copper. It's not going to kill you or make you sick, but if it leaches out into the soil, it can kill some of your biology, which, it's not a big deal, but we just use a food grade liner just to prevent that from happening. And then we have cedar, which is super expensive, but nothing leaches out. It's like it lasts a long time. This is like this art one where we use like it was supposed to be recycled bottles, but our contractor bought all new bottles, and this was like the most expensive bed. And then we have this recycled plastic that is like comes in kits that last a long time. It's recycled, even though it's like poly. It's a lot better than normal poly. It's like this recycled composite that's supposed to last a long time, and it's not supposed to leach anything. I've actually read a lot of stuff. It's actually better than most polys in the sunlight, but it's still a plastic, so it's up to you. And then we have these metal ones with a wood frame, and then these stone ones where we have pavers on the top where you can actually sit on them. I really like these beds. It's particularly the ones that I like to spend more money up front to build really durable beds that are going to last 50 years, like these 6x6s, instead of building really cheap beds that you have to replace every couple of years. But we'll get into like the finances and economics of all this stuff in a second. Just a second, let me
Can I bring you some soup?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to do something real quick. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So these are the things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about like what kind of requirements, like if you're going to do a home garden or garden in the park or somewhere, what are the basics you need to do these gardens, and then soil preparation. So what kind of, how are we going to get the soil ready for your garden, whether it's a raised bed or in the ground? And then we're going to talk about how to create, the garden beds with wood frames or how just mounds, and then talk a little bit about design today. Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure there's no more. All right, so for the first slide, I just want to actually just kind of open it up to everyone, just to kind of list out, if you want to list out in your chat, share with us why you're gardening, or like why, what is about gardening, like, it's it's so much easier just to go to the grocery store and buy some food, but like why are we all trying to grow our own food? If everyone just wants to type in a couple reasons in the chat real quick. Yeah, it makes me happy. Definitely. Yeah, it's therapeutic for sure. Salsa Journey 2021. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So we got eco-friendly, self-sustaining, the idea of growing your own food, how it's empowering, like this person said, my grandfather was a sharecropper in Georgia, and I wanted to carry on the legacy of farming. Awesome. I like a lot of food. Cool. So a lot of really great reasons. So we're just gonna add a couple more to that. and feel free to keep on listing reasons. But yeah, I mean, like, like the food, I remember I thought tomatoes tasted like plastic until I started growing my own tomatoes, and it was just so amazing. Especially like cherry, my favorite tomatoes are sun gold tomatoes. They're these hybrid, super, like cherry tomatoes, and they have like the highest sugar content of all tomatoes, and it's just so sweet, so good. If you want someone to get into gardening, this is a great one. It's super easy plant to grow too. Saves money. Like, I mean, it's expensive buying organic, better for your health. A lot of these plants are going to they're going to be more nutrient dense. They're not going to be grown. You can control whether there's pesticides and things like that. Increase food access. I always give like a caveat on that. Like, a lot of people try to push this idea that urban ag is going to cure hunger. It's not, but it's a great supplement to a lot of places that don't have, grocery stores or can't afford, super expensive whole food, stuff. So it's a great way to kind of increase food access, not, cure food access. I think sometimes we push it a little too far, save the planet. I mean, a huge, we're getting food from the other side of the world sometimes, or the other side of the country, and it's like huge carbon footprint, comes from, a lot of times, it's really, environmentally disastrous, where a lot of our agriculture, corporate agriculture, or industrial agriculture. I mean, like, some of the leading sources of pollution in our world come from different forms of industrial agriculture, animal agriculture. So just, having, access to that, growing yourself can really reduce that, that therapeutic, builds communities. A lot of these community gardens, I mean, it's the only time I've ever met my communities, my neighbors, is through, shared communal, growing as well. I mean, it can, gardens also can be exclusive too. And we'll talk more about that in our food justice class. They can actually, be a form of gentrification or exclusion or things like that. So we'll talk about ways to be intentional with that. Youth education is so cool, seeing kids like, realize that, tomato, the vegetables that come from their condiments and things like that. Like I have a 1-year-old that just loves tomatoes, and it's so cool watching them eat all that. It's empowering and, therapeutic, hobbies. I mean, it was a big part of, we actually pushed the mayor's office to keep our gardens essential during when COVID hit, because not only is it, it was an supplemental source of food for a lot of people, but just the communal aspect, everyone's like, separated in home, in quarantine, and like, I mean, I think it was just such a it's so important, that the therapeutic sense and the communal sense of these gardens, to keep them going, almost even, maybe more important with than growing your own food, the food part. But at the same time, I think we also all realized, during COVID, we start, I don't know if you've seen those pictures of like, I mean, thousands of pounds of agricultural food that was being tilled in on the farms because they lost their whole distribution networks because of COVID. And at the same time, we're watching lines, 5-mile lines at food banks. So I think, I think people are realizing that our food system is not a good system, and we need to do better. So I think one great way to start is kind of, growing local and growing our own food. All right, so how do we do that? So let's talk about requirements. So let's say let's just go through, I have a space in my backyard, I want to know, is this going to be a good space for gardening? So the first thing that we want to look at is sunlight. This is the most important thing. If you don't get enough sunlight, you could do mushrooms, but that's about it. You can't really do much. And we have mushroom classes too that are recorded if anyone's interested in that. It has like, no sunlight, but also you don't need to have, full sunlight all day long. You can just have you just need a good enough percentage of sunlight throughout the day. And you need to understand that, because that's going to dictate what kind of plants you can grow and you can't grow. So when people say full sun, most plants that we're going to be growing are full sun, like, or if they're, if they can survive in partial shade, that they may like full sun even better. So, I mean, that's generally what we're going for, full sun, which is 6 to 8 hours. But that may seem like a lot, but when you really, in the middle of the summer, I mean, we can have 14, 15, 16 hours of sunlight, depending on, if you're at the, what part of the summer. So that doesn't mean we need the full day to have full sun. That means we need to have what I like to talk about is the cardinal directions, that the sun rises in the east, goes in the south and then sets in the west. So we need to have 2 out of 3 of those directions. We need to have, a couple hours on east and a couple hours of west, but maybe we have a building directly south of us that blocks it, or we need to have, south and east, but then maybe have a huge tree in the west. So as long as you're able to get 6 hours of sunlight, which like you can at least get 2 directions, either east or, and south, east and west, west and south, you're able to grow just about anything. Full sun, I mean, there's a few things that don't like full sun, but most things like full sun, even if they're tolerant of shade. But let's say you only get one direction. Let's say you only get, some sun in the east for a couple hours, and then you got a building in south of you and a tree west of you, and that's it. So that's when you hit the partial shade category. As long as you're getting at least 3 hours of sunlight, there's a whole bunch of things you can still grow. And this is a great list. This isn't a definitive list, but this is a great list of things that grow well in the shade. I mean, a lot of these things they want full sun, but they'll still grow really well. My greens are, like Asian greens, chard, kale, grow in partial shade. Herbs are, super hardy. They'll grow in most environments. Root vegetables, legumes, which legumes are super important. Because legumes are what we call nitrogen fixers. So what nitrogen, they're like beans and peas and clover. They basically suck nitrogen from the air, and then they have a symbiotic relationship with this bacteria in their roots. If you actually pull out the plants, you'll see these little nodules on the roots. And they can accumulate nitrogen that slowly leaches out into your soil. And nitrogen is like one of the 3, NPKs, one of the 3 micronutrients that you need. So it's really important to have, like, what I like to have is one section of your garden dedicated to legumes. So peas in the spring, beans in the summer, and you grow beans all the way out, or maybe a quick, fall peas. Or some winter clover or things like that. And you have this one little section, in your garden with legumes, and that and it adds nitrogen to that section. And then every year you move that section around your garden. That's called crop rotation. And what it's going to do is it's going to fertilize, a different part of your garden every year. So we'll talk more about crop rotation, I think tomorrow or next week. But that's a great way to try to incorporate some kind of peas and beans in your garden. And then fruits like a lot of people like I used to grow a lot of blueberries. Blueberries are tough because they need kind of acidic soil. I've killed a lot of blueberries, but then I found these like really great ones like currants and gooseberries. Gooseberries are super delicious, and they grow like they're super hardy. It's hard to kill gooseberries. And then strawberries and things like that do really well in like partial shaded area. But then there's also ways like, let's say you get like, 2 hours of sunlight and you just need to increase it, or you get like 5 hours of sunlight and you really want to grow tomato that needs full sun. So there's some ways that you can actually increase your sunlight. So that's by, you could either like, have a, paint, north facing wall, white, and then because white, is a reflective coat, with sunlight. So that will actually reflect the sunlight and actually hits the other side of the plant. Because plants, I mean, they can absorb light, up, on the top, the bottom, any part, so if you could keep on bouncing that sunlight all over that plant, you're going to increase the amount of sunlight. I mean, you want to be careful not to have like a beam, like you don't want to, fry your plant, but as long as you're just having this general sunlight kind of bouncing over, not like a magnifying glass or anything, but as long as you're bouncing that, even on the bottom of the leaf can absorb, sunlight, and that's going to increase that. And so if you're barely on the cusp, but you're like, I'm not quite full sun, but I want to try it, have a background that's either white or has tinfoil. Some people even have reflective, you can buy this super expensive reflective mulch, or you could just make it out of tinfoil yourself. We talked about last class, mylar is the most reflective, material. If you go to like an end of a race and they're just throwing that mylar away, you can grab a whole bunch, but aluminum foil works just fine as well. So so if you want to increase, you don't have a lot of sunlight, you want to increase, find ways to bounce that sunlight, back and forth. And then the second part, most important is drainage. And this is something that we're dealing. This is why I sent that email about the letter gardens. I mean, it was this really productive site, it was built in the 70s, but just in the past like decade, it's just, the drainage just got really bad. And now, like, I mean, I was talking to gardeners last year, and I mean, they would grow, the soil was fantastic. They would grow all these crops, but as soon as they would get a hard rain, it would just flood everything, and everyone would lose, like a half acre of crops would all die at once. So that's why we're trying to dig these French drains and stuff. But if you're going to, or if you're doing a raised bed, you don't need to worry about drainage. And that's a beauty about raised beds. It can rain really hard and everyone's flooding, and you're having the best crops of your life. So it's just, we'll talk about the costs and about raised beds. But drainage, if you grow in the soil, and some of the reasons why people grow in the soil, one is cheaper, and two, you can grow a lot more food if you know what you're doing. It's harder to grow in the ground, but you can grow a lot more if once you figure out how to grow. But if you want to check, this garden, what you want to do is you dig a hole the size of a shovel, like give or take, a foot down, foot deep. Fill it up once with water, then come back, later in the day. You want to kind of prime it, once, and then you fill it back up again. And the idea is, I mean, you can get a tape measure and you can measure it. Like you want to have, 1 to 3 inches per hour, but really like come back in like an hour or two, and if it's still, full, you got bad drainage. And so if you do try to plant in bad drainage, I mean, the plants they're not going to grow very well. And as soon as it rains, they're all going to die. So that's why there's options if you do have bad drainage. One of them, double dig. Well, we're going to talk about double digging in a little while, but it's a way to like kind of like basically till 2 feet deep. It's a really great strategy. Well, yeah, we'll talk more about that later. And then the raised beds, like you don't have to worry about drainage at all. You can actually, pick exactly what kind of soil you want. It's just, kind of pricey, and you got to put them together. And then like, but if a big thing is like raised mounds. You want to like, we'll talk more about this too, but you want to take like a hard rake, and you want to till the whole area and then rake it up. So you want your paths to be on level, and then ideally you want your garden beds. So both of these are garden bed, like raised beds. This is a raised bed with wood. This is a raised bed without a wood. These typically are 4 feet wide. Raised beds without are like 2 to 3 feet. But you want that to be at least a foot high. So if it rains and floods, hopefully it'll flood in the walkways, and it won't flood your plant roots. Ideally, but I mean, if it floods that bad, it's going to eventually flood everything. And then what we're doing at Letterer is we're installing some French drains. So French drains are these perforated, or like pipes with holes in them, and you can either backfill them with gravel, or they have these gravelless ones if you don't want to wheelbarrow gravel, which I don't. So I bought these that have these socks on them full of like kind of this like lightweight, shale gravel. And then you just you dig a trench, just put this thing in, fill it back in. You want to have it on a slight angle, and then you want to have a place you want the water to go. The idea is if this whole area floods, there's a water table, about a foot or two deep. It just gets so compact that the water just sits there. And if it has no place to go, then the more it's just going to slow. And as long as it rains long enough, it's going to flood the whole area. But if you have this like French drain that takes this maybe to the street, or to a rain garden, or to someplace for someplace that it's all right to overflow, that should drain your area. I mean, your area will still get wet, but it won't get flooded. Hopefully. And then the last one is just find another spot. Cool. And then the third thing you want to think about is water access. So you want to be able to, the easier the better. If you're going to if it's going to be a pain in the butt to water your garden, you may want to think about finding another spot, especially when it's like, mid-July, there's mosquitoes, it's 110 degrees out, you want it to be as easy as possible to water. So you'll look for water spigots, if you have one of those weird little things on the wall, you just need this water key to turn it on. You could tap into a water line. If you don't have that, like if you're trying to do one in a park, and you don't see any place to tap, get water from, you can actually call this service called Miss Utility. It's actually kind of low. I think that you have to, call this if you're going to be digging more than a foot deep, and they'll come out and they'll spray paint or flag all your utility lines, like your power, electricity, gas. But blue is for water. And if you have a water line there, you can actually, you could hire a plumber to tap in and create a spigot. I mean, he might have to do like, meters and backflow preventers and stuff. And it could, run, up to $1,000 to get a spigot in there. But that's one way, if you're not sure, if you don't see a water source, call your Miss Utility. It's free. And then, and then a couple days later, they'll come out and flag the whole area. And then you can have different ways to collect rainwater. Just know that rainwater, you need a big surface. Like I see a lot of like little barrels attached to like tool sheds, like little 4x8 tool sheds. I mean, that could take all year to fill up that rain barrel. Ideally, you want to have a whole house or like a school, or you want a big surface that's collecting rainwater. Like we'll put gutters on our hoop houses, 100-foot long hoop houses, and that will capture a lot of water and direct it to rain barrels. But yeah, if you have a house, we have a great program called River Smart Homes, where they'll actually install a rain barrel for you for like, I think it's like $50 or something. It's a subsidized program with DOEE, Department of Energy and Environment. So definitely, if you want to get like subsidized cheap rainwater installations like rain gardens, rain barrels, tree plantings, check out River Smart Homes. It has about a year waiting list, but I mean, it's worth it. It's so cheap. But when you're collecting water, you want to make sure you don't have asphalt shingles. Or if you do, it's not a big deal. It's just with asphalt shingles, when rain first hits it washes a lot of heavy metals off. And so that if you do that, you can do what's called a first flush system, where basically when it first rains, it washes all the heavy metals off. Just for a couple minutes, and then it's clean water. And then this first flush system is basically, it takes all the heavy metals down here, and then the water with, clean water rises up here, and eventually will go in your rain barrel. So if you do have asphalt shingles, you can still collect water. Just get a first flush system, so you're not, getting heavy metals in your water. And then we had gardens that we tapped into fire hydrants, ran hoses across streets with like these things. There's a lot of tricky things. I just built a solar well at one of our farms because we couldn't figure out how to actually get water access. Water access is a big deal, but hopefully it's not going to be a big deal if it's like your backyard as opposed to like some random park in the middle of nowhere. All right, so you have, let's say I found a spot, it has a decent amount of sunlight, it has good drainage, or I'm going to build a raised bed. I have water access, so I'm ready to go. I'm convinced. I want this to be my garden. So now we're going to talk about how to get the soil ready for your garden. The first thing you want to do, especially if you're growing in the garden, and it's really a good idea to do this regardless, is to do a soil test. Especially if it's in your backyard. Like we just found out, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and our 1-year-old, we took him to the doctor the other day, and he got that, that you found out his lead was actually, it wasn't dangerously high, but it was kind of high. It was not enough to qualify for services, but it was a little bit high. So we did soil tests everywhere. We checked out all parts. We checked our water and everything, and we found out it was from our soil. We have tons of lead in our soil, and our 1-year-olds just like to crawl around and throw things in their mouth. So what we're going to do, we're going to bring in a bunch of topsoil and just cap it off, and then to start a whole new layer. We're trying to do like 2 inches of topsoil, and then, grow grass and stuff. But it's good to know. I mean, because a lot of that stuff, lead and stuff, it's not going to exactly, get into your crops. It's more about like you breathe in it especially when it's dry and gets dusty. You may have some on your crops, that you eat. It's more about like ingesting and breathing it, and that's really what hurts people. So you can soil test for lead, toxic stuff, but you can also you want to figure out just if your soil has the right things to grow a plant, which a lot of soil doesn't. The most important thing is pH. So this is like it's like a 1 through, I think, 14 or 12 or something. It's on the 1 is like super acidic, it's like acid, and like 14 is like bleach, is super alkaline. So it's it measures the acidity of your soil, and ideally the best part, if you want to grow things, you need to be between 5.5 and 7, or even like maybe 7.5, but really 7 to 5.5 is what you want. So you want to test your soil for pH. That's the most important thing. It takes forever to change the pH of the soil. So if you have bad pH, if you're not too far off, we'll talk about things you can do. But if you have really bad pH, like it's like a 3 or 4, you just want to either do raised beds or find a different spot. And then you can also, test for like, nutrients and organic matter, but these are all things you can add later. So it's good to know, but it's not going to really change your it's not a huge factor. And so this graph, all these weird shapes, this has to do with why plants can only grow between 5.5 and 7. Like most plants, like blueberries can go down to like 4, 4.5. They like it more acidic, but most plants are 5.5 to 7, or 7.5. Is that's like the way, that's the perfect balance of acidity and alkaline, where plants can start absorbing nutrients like nitrogen and potassium, phosphorus, all these nutrients. This is why this weird graph, when it goes narrow down there, that means as the stronger, more acidic it is, the harder it is for plants to suck up nitrogen. Same with alkaline. And yeah, so that's why this graph looks so weird. But as long as you're in this area, like the 5.5 to 7, you should be able to absorb your plants will absorb all these nutrients. Because a lot of times, I mean, your soil has all these nutrients. It just it's too acidic, or something's wrong, and your plants can't pick it up. So yeah, so doing a soil test, you typically, there are some services. Sometimes UDC will come to your house. They're not right now, and I think they're hurting for funding. But most of the time, you need to do it yourself, and you can. It's pretty easy. You just need a couple of things. You can have like these fancy little soil probes or augers that gets a nice cross section of soil. But really, I mean, you just need a shovel. If you don't have one of these, in our tool share, we have some of these if you want to borrow them. A bucket, a tarp, a plastic bag, and a Sharpie is all you need for a soil test. So when you're doing soil tests, you want to identify unique areas. Like if you have like your backyard that's like pristine and nothing runs off on it, in your side yard, maybe you get a lot of runoff from roads, where there's a lot of toxins and heavy metals in roads, or maybe in the other side of your house, maybe it used to be an old like factory or whatever that's got tons of arsenic. So you want to find unique areas, and then do a soil test for each unique area. Because if I do my backyard that's pristine, and then I got this like toxic, factory place, if I do one big test, it's not going to tell me anything. I need to have one test for the backyard and one test for this toxic, brownfield. So you want to identify that, and then once you found like your area that you want to do, dig about 5 to 15 holes, like every like 15 feet apart. So it depends on how, if it's a small backyard, maybe just dig like 4 or 5 holes. If it's a big one, maybe 10 or 15. The idea is you want to dig a hole like with a shovel, or auger or soil probe, and then you want to you take that shovel and you want to slide it down the edge of the hole, and you want to have basically like a 1/2 inch slice. But the important thing is you want to have there's always different cross sections of layers of soil. You want to get at least 8 inches to a foot deep with like that little sliver. And you take that sliver, you pull off the grass, pull off rocks, and then you throw it in your bucket. And then you do that, for 5 or 10 holes around your yard. Throw it in the bucket. Then let you could dump the bucket on the tarp, let it dry out in the sun. It'll be a lot easier. And then put it back in the bucket, mix it all up. And then you just want to take a cup of soil, worth, put it in a plastic bag, mark it on the plastic bag with your marker. This is for my backyard. And then go to one of these sites. There's a lot of soil testing sites. So, but these are the ones I've used before that seem to work all right. Like A&L, this is in Virginia. This is, UMass, Amherst, UDC. I don't think is soil testing right now, but it's good. It's always, if you just type in UDC soil test, they'll give you like the contact info, and you can check with them. And then, you just go online, you print out a form, fill out the information. It's usually like, it's different pricing, but I mean, it could be anywhere from like, $10 to like maybe $60, depending on how many things you're testing for. And then you fill up the bag, mail it, and then literally like less than a week, they'll email you the results. And we'll go over the results. I mean, it looks crazy at first, but it's pretty, it's pretty simple to read once you understand it. So that's just for like nutrients and pH and lead and stuff. Another type of soil testing that's getting more popularity is testing your microbiology, like testing if you have a lot of healthy nematodes and beneficial bacteria and beneficial funguses and stuff, because that's ultimately what you want to have, like really live and healthy soil. So that if you want to get really expert, you could actually send it to these places, and they'll tell you about your biology. A little more advanced, I think, stick with this at first, and then maybe you can reach out to this, another year. But then they send you back this crazy looking thing. But really, I mean, there's just a couple things you want to look for. You want to look for the pH. So soil pH 5.6. So that fits between the 5.5 and 7. So that's great. You're going to grow really great in that soil. You can look at the nutrients, like I said, but it's really easy to add more nutrients and compost and the organic matter and stuff. So this just kind of, I mean, sometimes they'll give you suggestions like add, a certain amount of grams of phosphorus, that's nice to know, but it's just give you a good, indication. But then you want to look for like lead and arsenic. And there's a natural amount of lead and arsenic in the soil. Anything below 300 for lead is okay. Anything below 20 arsenic, that's parts per million or milligrams over kilograms. Most of them times they list parts per million. So this one's 47, so that's perfect. That's a natural amount of lead that is naturally in soils. Anything over 300, you gotta start worrying. Like 300 to 400, it's like a little bit iffy, and then like 500 is like, yeah, you don't want to really mess with that soil. There's lots of ways to remediate it, and also, like I said, just what we're doing is we're just adding a new layer of topsoil and just kind of burying it. So that's another way. Like sunflowers, over many years will pull up like heavy metals and things. There's a lot of bioremediation, like mushroom remediation and stuff. I don't know a whole lot about that, but it's pretty cool if you want to research that more. So let's say, okay, so we did the soil test, found out that soil test is pretty good. We can grow in this area. The pH is fine. The lead's fine. So now we can start prepping the soil, because most of the time, it's probably just going to be a sod area, and sod is like, that thick grass is super hard to deal with. And then you usually have, compacted soil underneath that sod. And especially if you're in DC, it's probably tons of clay, and it's super hard to shovel. So you can do things depending on how far away you are in the season to kind of remediate your soil. Let's say we're in January and you want to plant in March, you may want to think about doing sheet mulching. So that's you lay out cardboard and newspaper over a certain area, add a layer of compost and then a layer of wood chips, water it really good. And what happens is it kills the sod and smothers it. And then that dead sod becomes plant food, like worms and stuff come up and start eating that. And worms don't actually eat food. What they do is they grab a piece of organic matter, spread it around in holes in their tunnels, and then come back and eat the fungus on it later. So what they're doing is they're just like tilling and spreading all kinds of organic matter. So that will loosen up your soil a little bit, and then in a couple months you can dig into it. I mean, it won't make it easy, but make it much easier. And then if let's say you have a lot of time, let's say you decide you want to do a garden in fall, like maybe October, but you're not, so that maybe you have 6 months or so before you're going to start planting in spring, in March. So you could do a thing called lasagna gardening, which is basically sheet mulching, just like 3 feet high. So you just you grab whatever you have, leaves, straw, dead plants, grass, and you just do these layers of like high nitrogen, high carbon, and just do these ideas. You want to get it 3 or 4 feet tall, and then over 6 months it'll break down ideally to about a foot, and then you add some topsoil to it to give it some structure, and then you have this really amazing soil that you can grow in. But since we're in March right now, this is probably, I doubt anyone's going to be doing this right now, but this is like, if you want to start a new garden next year, these are some things you can do to kind of prep the area. And then the really great thing you want to do is double digging. So this is great. You only want to do this once. You don't want to double dig an area every year. This isn't just normal tilling. This is like tilling on steroids. And if you do it every year, you're just going to trash any kind of biology and worms and stuff that you have in your soil. But it's a good idea to do this once just to kind of prepare it. And the idea is you want to you're tilling 2 feet deep. So I kind of shovel out a foot, and move it over here. And then I take a pitchfork and then break up this second foot. And then I go over here and I shovel this into, this, and then I, pitchfork this. So I have a really hard time. I always try to explain double digging and I just do a horrible job. So actually, I'm going to play a 3-minute video just so you guys can see what double digging is. But I mean, double digging is really awesome. You can add compost while you're doing it. It's a great way to mix it up. The whole goal is you want to have 2 feet of really great tilled soil, because most plants need about a foot of soil to work, but if you give it 2 feet, like tomatoes, they're going to be like that super happy tomatoes if they're able to, send their roots 2 feet deep. So I'm just going to play this video instead of trying to explain this, which I do a terrible job. But oh wait, let me see if I okay, sorry, I missed a couple questions. Last question. Not sure if I missed this. What does it mean when you have too high organic matter or higher than desired? Yeah, so let's go back real quick and then I'll play the video. So yeah, this is actually really high organic matter. And we have too much organic matter. It's just too much, and it's just not, the plants can only absorb so much organic matter, and then it's not good for the structure of the soil. So ideally, you want to have like 3 to 5%. This is actually from a hoop house. So this is actually, people that have probably been like adding enormous amount of compost every year. I guarantee that no one is going to have too high organic matter. This is not like a home gardening problem. This is more of like a industrial or production farms. But just if it's too high, it just doesn't grow very well. Ideally, like I said, you want to have 3 to 5%, but I don't think anyone's going to have to deal with that, to be honest. Or if you do, if you get that in your backyard, send me an email. I'd love to see what your backyard looks like. But I've never seen anything close over like 3 or 4% organic matter. All right, so I'm gonna do double digging.
Hi, I'm Trisha, an organic gardener. Soil preparation is so important in organic gardening. And today I want to talk about double digging. This is a technique that was invented by French market gardeners in the 19th century. The double digging technique involves loosening the soil to about double the depth of the head of a garden spade. Double digging for initial soil preparation really does a good job if your soil is compacted. But if your soil is nice and loose and loamy, you don't want to double dig because that will just disturb the earthworms. To double dig, you'll need a large tub or a wheelbarrow, a spade, and a digging fork or a broad fork. Fertilizers and compost can be added at this time too, especially fertilizers with phosphorus, which moves very slowly through the soil. Double digging is hard work, but it's really the best way to loosen your soil. And it doesn't create hardpan like rototilling can. And remember, you don't have to double dig your whole garden, just the planting area. Before you double dig, make sure your soil is dry enough. To check soil moisture, dig down 6 inches. Grab a handful of soil and squeeze it together. If the lump you make can be crumbled easily, the soil is dry enough to double dig. If you double dig while your soil is wet, you're going to do more harm than good, so just wait until it dries out. Mark out your bed with stakes and strings. That way you won't do more work than you need to. We're going to dig a trench. It's going to be the width of the bed, and it's going to be no smaller than the width of the broad fork. It's going to be 12 inches deep. Then we're going to put the dirt into the bucket. Okay, now for the easy part. We're going to grab the broad fork and we're going to loosen up the soil underneath the soil we just dug out. Oh, this soil is so nice and loose. Now's the time to add the fertilizer and now a little bit of compost. I'm going to dig the second trench. The topsoil that I dig up from the second trench is going to replace the topsoil from the first trench. Continue this pattern until you get to the last trench. When you're finished trenching, just add all the soil from the first trench into the last trench. So now just water your beds a little bit to let the dirt settle, and you're ready for your French intensive garden and to grow organic for life.
All right. So hopefully that, that was better than me trying to spend 5 minutes just babbling. But a couple concepts I wanted to go over. One is broad fork. So you don't need a broad fork. They're kind of expensive. We have a couple in the tool share if you ever want to borrow it. You could do double digging with just a pitchfork. The reason why you want to use a pitchfork is once you get to the second foot layer, you can't shovel that. It's so hard at that point. You just want to kind of stab it and break it up. They mentioned dead panning. We'll talk about let's see what the next slide. Okay, so a lot of people rototill. I'll show you a picture of the rototiller in a second. It's like a machine that just blends up and tills the soil, and it makes the top layer, the top 4 to 6 inches, like really beautiful. But then what happens is it actually compacts the soil underneath. So you have this like beautiful, nice soil, but then it gets like dead pen. We call it dead pen, which is basically things get so compacted that water can't seep through it, and that's where you start having flooding problems. So that's why it's good to, like, even if you're rototilling, it's good to kind of like follow it up with a pitchfork or a broad fork. And then she had mentioned not to do any work when your soil is wet. That's good for, like, you never want to do any garden work when it's wet out, because then when you step on wet soil, it compacts everyththing, and then you got to uncompact it later. So that's why when she said you'll do more damage than good if you do this when it's wet. Cool. Anyone? Let me know if anyone has any questions on double digging. And she mentions, like, if you already have great soil, don't do this, because it's just it's also a lot of work too, for sure. Cool. All right. So talking about soil structure. So this is the next one you want to think about when you're building your soil. Soil the perfect soil structure is something around like 40% sand, 40% silt, and 20% clay. And what makes what is the size of the particles. The clay has really small soil particles, so it can get compacted really well, and which it can hold nice nutrients, but then it doesn't have much porosity. Sand is really big particles that doesn't compact very well. It's very loose, which is great drainage, but it doesn't hold on to nutrients. And then silt is kind of like the in between. So having that nice mixture. Unfortunately, most of soil that we have is clay in DC. We have a lot of clay. So that's why you want to kind of break up the clay, and you could add like sand to the clay. You want to be careful if you add the right kind of sand and the right kind of clay. You'll start getting kind of a concrete thing, but most sand, you can look it up. But really, the best thing to add to clay to add porosity, or to sand to add retention, is just compost. This is something you want to add every year. You want to keep on adding compost and mixing it in, and not only is that going to add porosity and stuff, it's actually going to bring biology that's going to kind of remediate your soil and break things down and stuff. So and there's like certain things, there's certain amendments that will help break down clay as well. I forget what the amendment was, but you can look that up. Google amendments for clay. They're like clay busters and stuff like that. I want to say maybe like phosphorus or something like that. You can get, you can do a lot of research, but if you don't really want to do research, just add compost every year to your garden, and that's going to help, whatever your situation is. And then so ideally you want to add like 2 inches of compost. You want every year you want to spread 2 inches of compost around your garden, and then you want to till it in. So you got two options. You could do normal tilling, which is like, this is a rear tine tiller. There's front tines that are really small, and the tiller's up here, and then the rear tine ones are the ones that really like till really well. We have a couple in our tool share if you ever need to borrow it, one of these. But like I said, you don't just want to do that, because it's going to till up really nicely, but then it's going to deadpan at 6 inches. So if you do that, it's great, do this, but then go back with a pitchfork or a broad fork and break up that deadpan. And tilling's great. It's a great way to kind of mix in nutrients, to mix in compost, to kind of aerate your soil. But there's a new movement of like kind of more like a sustainability movement. It's starting to recognize that there's a lot of fragile biology in your soil. That gets like it'll come back, but it kind of gets like chopped up in pieces and worms and stuff when you do this tilling. So a lot of people do what's called non-till, where you still cover the area with compost, but you use like pitchforks and broad forks and kind of just like stab them in and rock them back and forth. So you're just making little cracks and things and letting all the compost like kind of fall into that cracks and stuff. So it's not as efficient as tilling, but it's much more friendly to your biology. It's really like, I mean, it's your real preference. I do a mixture, I'll have like tomatoes that I'll till the rows, but then around the tomatoes, I'll have, non-till stuff. I definitely recommend till everything once, at least the first year till. And then from there you can do different, if you want to go non-till afterwards, that's fine. Oh, and Renee says a flip-flop gardening. I'm not really sure what that. Do you want to tell us what that is?
I was just looking at her gardening with the flip flops on.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm a Chaco, yeah, sandal gardener. So I feel that it's nice that if you're okay with having that breeze between your toes, but yeah, I wouldn't do that with sandals. She's gonna mess up your feet. Broad forking, yeah, it's a workout. um all right, and then so then you decided how you're going to till. So the next step is like how you want to mend your soil, like because most soil is probably missing something. You could try to get, you could try, pick out all the different kinds of, micronutrients and macronutrients and try to, do, if you're into chemistry and microbiology, that's great. They have all this organic stuff. I mean, the problem with this stuff is like Miracle Grow, it's like too high in nitrogen, so you'll have a lot of unhealthy plant growth. It'll outgrow the roots, and then it gets a little unhealthy, and that's what attracts pests and diseases are attracted to unhealthy plants. Also, this stuff washes away really easy into our watering system, and then it fertilizes our algae, and then we have algae blooms and all kinds of nasty stuff happening. So we want to try to get away from this as all possible. Sometimes you have to use this if you're dealing with a specific, circumstance, or if you want a specific thing like your tomatoes or like need more, potassium or whatever, and this is all you have, and that's fine. But you really want to try to do as much as possible organic, because what's nice, I mean, this is like compost and a lot of like, fish fertilizers and stuff. Because compost is the best thing, because compost has a lot of nutrients, but it's a stable, it'll stay in your garden and won't wash away, and it slowly releases its nutrients and adds biology, healthy biology that breaks down things into more nutrients. You want to go organic as much as possible. So someone says places in DC to get free compost. So actually there's a whole page. If you go to dugnetwork.org, dugnetwork.org, and there's a whole, a section. There's always things about gardening. Go to gardening. It's always drop down menus, and go to like garden supplies. There's a whole section on places to get free stuff, whether free plants, free, wood chips, free, compost. In this area you can get like free manure from either DuPont stables or Rock Creek Park. But if you pick up manure, you want to age it. You want to let it sit for a while until it's not steaming, and then incorporate it, or it's just like too much for your garden. You can pick up, sometimes it's compost, sometimes it's mulch. It's free at like Fort Totten transfer station. They send out all the wood chips, and they send out all the street leaves to this Pogo Organic only, and then they recycle, they compost them and then send them back and then give it away. Only problem is they don't filter stuff, so you may have some trash in it. I don't mind using it as mulch. It's not the best compost sometimes. I mean, it's like the free stuff. It's just like it's just not the best stuff, the free stuff. But if it's free, sometimes that's more important than is if, I know DC Water, if you're into like biosolids, which is like our DC Water is amazing. They have like one of the biggest biosolids programs, and what call that, that gas composting, and or whatever. They have this huge, where they send all their waste and they create the gas and they capture the gas and then powers everything, like their whole facility. It's really cool. But they make this what's called biosolids, which is like basically like human waste, compost, which I've grown in it. It's amazing stuff. It's super high in nitrogen. It's just like it's just whether you're okay with it or not. It's like yeah, but oh, not geothermal. I'm thinking of it'll come to me later. But yeah, definitely check out, there's a whole bunch of places where you can get free compost. A lot of them are DPW, like Alexandria and Arlington and Tacoma all give away free compost. So yeah, definitely check it out. And then the best part is just making your own compost as well. And then like amendments. So then beyond composting, sometimes it's good to give it some kind of fertilizer and things like that. I mean, compost, we'll have a whole class on compost, but compost does so many different things. It like improves, organic matter, adds nutrients, it adds porosity, holds moisture, builds structure. Even if you're off, your pH is off a little bit, it actually creates this buffer zone that allows plants, to tolerate, low or high pH levels. Barely though, but so that's great, and then there's a couple other ones I really recommend, like compost tea. We'll talk about how to make compost tea in the compost class, but you just basically get finished compost, you put it into like a pantyhose or something and soak it in water, let it bubble, add molasses, and then let it bubble for a couple days, and then it's just awesome probiotic that you could spray your whole garden, and then your garden's got this healthy biology. I mean, you don't need to do it every year, but it's nice to do it at least once. And you don't need to do it your first year, but it's something to think about, down the line. Manure is great. Let that kind of break down first. Let it age. Let it sit in the pile for a year, and let it age, or compost it with, add carbon to it, and actually compost it yourself, and over a couple months, and then use it. If you add it fresh, it's just so high in salt it like burns your plants. So don't ever add like steaming or fresh manure. This stuff, so there's a lot of micro and macro nutrients. This is a whole wormhole, and I don't have the time for or patience for it. So I found the perfect fertilizer that has like everything, and it's organic, and it's not too high, it's not going to burn your plants. It's Neptune's Harvest. It's a fish and seaweed fertilizer. So fish fertilizer, it's like really high in your macronutrients and NPK. Seaweed fertilizer is really high, or kelp is high in micronutrients, iron, phosphorus, sulfur, all the different things that your plants like. It's a perfect mixture. It does smell like fish. You want to just add like a little bit, like maybe a couple tablespoons into a watering can, then fill that watering can full of water, and then just water your garden with it. You don't want to add too much. And it may, like, if you got some cats in the area, they may like come digging up in your garden looking for some kind of buried fish. But it's really great stuff. I use it on my seedlings. I use it in my garden. It's important, like you don't want to over fertilize. Even with organic stuff, you can over fertilize because it starts accumulating salts over time and doesn't naturally kind of like wash away the salts. I probably, like, a good rule of thumb is like, once a season is great, once a month is pretty good. I mean, some professionals may do it like once a week. It's really up to you. I would recommend once a month at the most. Unless you kind of know what you're doing and you're not over fertilizing, but once a month is a good amount. But also you don't need to fertilize. You're fine just adding compost. This is just if you want to give your garden a little bit more kick, and speed things up a little bit. And then, like, if you have bad drainage, we talked about this in the last class. Vermiculite is expanded shell. Perlite is kind of like this volcanic, rock that's heated up, and like those styrofoam. It looks like styrofoam balls, but it's actually perlite. If you mix that stuff into, like, especially raised beds, you'll have a lot better porosity. And just like vermiculite, use a mask, because if you inhale that stuff, it's an irritant for your lungs. And then there's some like natural ones. If you have not too low pH, but if your pH is like 4.5, you could probably get that back up, with eggshells and hardwood ashes if you have a fire pit. Or if you need to lower your pH just like a half, you can probably do that with sulfur and coffee grounds. But I mean, if you need to lower it a lot, it just takes years and years of doing this to really do it, though. And then we'll talk more about what plants look like when they're missing things. Like nitrogen is good for the leaves, potassium is good for the flowers and fruit making, phosphorus is good for the roots. And we'll have a whole section during the plant disease class to talk about what your plant, if your plant's a certain color, what's it missing, things like that. And then like compost, we talked about, it's always good to add compost when you do a fresh garden, but also you can add it throughout the year in what we call top dressing, where you just kind of, take some fresh compost and kind of spread it around your crops and just let the rainwater and stuff kind of like, blend it into the soil. So you can do that, throughout the season whenever you have extra compost, or when you change your gardens, you can do that. If you're non-tilling, you can, this is how you want to like compost. And then cover crop is so cover crop's a little bit advanced. If you're a first time gardener, don't worry about cover cropping. Just worry about, just plant your that's the thing. We talk about a lot of stuff in here. If you're a first time gardener, just worry about, picking what you want to eat, and plant them in March, water them every day, add some compost, eat, and then just grow them till they die, and then buy a bag of mulch and cover your garden with mulch over the winter. The idea is you don't want to have exposed garden in the winter, because you're going to lose your nutrients. It's going to erode. So you want to, at the very least, you want to cover it with mulch. But once you get the hang, if you want to, slowly start adding things to your garden, different things, cover crop is amazing. Cover crop is a great way to add these beneficial plants and then till them in, and they add all these nutrients, or if they help the soil structures. And they actually add a lot of nutrients. There was this farm, Radix Farm, I think it's now Owl's Nest Farm, where I don't know if this is still true, but when my friend who managed Radix Farm, Maryland's a little backwards sometimes with compost. They think compost is like a thing that's going to run off into the watershed, which actually is the opposite. It keeps things from running off. But anyway, she was an area that she couldn't use compost, and she did she was like a 100 share CSA farm. Like, it was a big farm, so she just did nothing but cover crop, and that a winter cover crops, and clover and things like that, and that added enough nutrients that she didn't need compost. So that's how powerful this stuff is once you get the hang of it. And so there's a warm weather, there's like a summer cover crop called buckwheat. This is like, let's say you have a spot in your garden that you're not going to do anything for a couple months, and you just need a filler. You want it, you don't want like weed seeds and things getting into the air. So you just spread a bunch of buckwheat, which is actually a great, pollinator. It'll attract beneficial insects. It grows really quickly. It grows aggressively, like it'll push out weeds. And it's just a nice way to kind of like fill in this area during the summer. And then whenever you're ready to plant, you just kind of, you till it up again. And it's really easy to till up. And then you just, let it sit, sit in the soil for like a week, break down, and then plant. So that's great for you. That's like the only warm weather cover crop I know. But most people use cool weather. They're trying to add nutrients to their garden over the winter. White clover is fantastic. So that's that nitrogen fixer. White clover is the short one. Red and Clemson, gets like a foot and a half. But white clover, I use white clover in my rows and stuff. I mean, it's a great substitute for grass. But it adds nitrogen. So we'll talk about how to plant it in a second and when to plant it. And then like if you have really bad soil and you want to break it up over the winter for your spring, you could plant these daikon radishes or tillage radishes that just kind of like shoot the radishes into the ground. They just explode. They're like a foot and a half radishes. And then you can harvest them if you want, or you could just leave them in the ground, let them rot, and then just add organic matter. And then come in spring, you're gonna have a really great garden. And then like if clover, you have to seed clover in like August, September. But if you miss that, you could still seed late winter stuff like winter rye and winter wheat. It just the problem with that, it's not a problem. These are great cover crops. And they just look like grass basically. It's just a lot more work to till it in the spring. You got to like really chop it all up and till it in, and it's a lot more work compared to like clover, which is super easy to kind of till in. So someone asked, what does it mean that you might need to inoculate the white clover? Oh yeah, I should have got a picture of this. So sometimes the soil, most soil, like healthy soil, has that inoculant, has that bacteria that attaches onto legumes, nitrogen fixers into the roots, and that relationship is what really produces the nitrogen. It's not the plant. It's a symbiotic relationship with bacteria on their roots. But if you have bad soil, you may not have that inoculant in your soil. So after you till everything up and you could buy it. It's only like, I think it's like $1 or $2 it's just like, clover, inoculant, nitrogen, whatever. And it's a powder. You just put it into a watering can and water your soil. You only have to do it once, and then your soil, as long as your soil stays healthy, it always has that inoculant. And so if you don't know, if definitely check it out, and it's super cheap. All right, so actually how to do cover crops is like I said, you could plant, if you're doing a winter cover crop, you got to get your clover in early, which means you got to rip up plants that may still be producing, or you just sections of it. You could do that. I don't cover crop my whole garden. I'll pick one section and cover crop it, and then I'll have a different section every year, just to get that nutrients. But I like to grow things all winter as well. So we'll talk more about that. It's a lot of give and take. But typically, like if you're doing clover, get that into the ground, September, early October at the latest. Or if you want to finish out your tomatoes or whatever you're growing, and then plant it. You can plant winter rye, winter wheat in like October and November. So you kind of just like take a hard break and just scuffle up the soil. You do a thing called broadcasting, where you just take a handful. They're all tiny seeds. You take a handful of seeds and just kind of shake it out, kind of broadcast it over, and then lightly kind of cover it with some soil again, and then it's a good idea to mulch it with like a straw, and then you want to water it really well, like like a normal plant. You want to water it every day, every other day, and then once it starts growing, once it establishes itself, you don't need to water it anymore. But it start growing, and then it will keep on growing until the winter hits, and then it will just stay, it won't grow too much over the winter with a lack of sunlight, but it will protect your soil. And then in the spring, like let's say like a month before you want to harvest, or want to first plant, you chop all this down with shears or weed whacker or whatever, and then you let it mulch, you let it dry out a little bit, and then you till it in, mix it all up into your soil, water it really well, and wait a couple weeks for it to kind of break down. And then at a certain point, once it's broken down, and you're ready to plant, it's like the most amazing soil. It's such good soil. Like it's so high in nutrients and organic matter. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, and I wouldn't recommend this for the first year gardeners, but once you feel confident with your gardening, definitely try to incorporate at least a portion of your garden with some cover crop, and it's just so amazing. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is bed creation, how to actually make some of these beds. So we have our garden, we have our spot, we have our soil, we've amended it, or we've done all these, tested it, all that stuff. Now we want to start sculpting these areas into beds. And beds can either be, wooden beds or just normal beds, which we talked a little bit about already. The ideal one, if you're growing in the garden, a good ideal one is get a hard rake, till the area, rake up these rows 2 to 3 feet wide, have a foot walking path, and then 2-3 feet wide. Try to get your beds about a foot high, and then that's perfect for planting. If it rains really hard, they're not going to flood. I'll plant either plant like clover in the aisles, or put down some cardboard and some wood chips to sheet mulch it. That works really well. And I'm going to show you a video in a second of how someone actually doing that. But then you also want to know, understand contour lines. Let's say you're on a, this is like if you're on a drastic hill. If you're on a slight hill, it's not, it's good to know where the water is going to wash off, but if you're like a drastic hill, you want to find the contour lines and do like where you can take you can attach 2 strings on stakes, and this is called a line level. They're like $2, and you put it on, and it can tell you what the contours and the grades of the area. And you can if it's really bad, you can do terrace gardens. You can dig into the hillside. I'll show you a picture of have raised beds and stuff. But most point, I mean, if it's not that bad, you don't have to worry too much about it. If you're only a little bit off, you're fine. And then also, if you wanted to do some kind of ADA, accessibility issue, like if you have, if there's like, people that are going to be using, wheelchairs or walkers, they're not going to be able to go on these like foot-long paths. So it's good to have these foot-long paths, but then have 3 feet paths every once in a while, where you can get wheelbarrows more accessible. And then if you want turnout, what we do in our gardens is we do like 3-foot aisles, and then we have a 5-foot aisle all around, because that's so people can turn around if they have mobility issues and things like that. All right, so question, sorry, basic question. Why do you want to create a high bed? Yeah, thank you. So you want to create a high bed, basically, so if it rains really hard, you don't, you won't, your plants won't get flooded. Well, ideally, it's like if it rains and it floods this whole area, you know, an inch or two, your plants are still going to be fine because they're up in the foot high. And also that it's a lot easier to kind of mend that and make it really great, fluffy, nice soil, you know, as opposed to like digging, you know, just going to, you know, flat ground and just digging straight into the ground. That's going to flood, and it's also going to be, you know, it's hard to make like it's hard to get that really fluffy, nice soil that you want. That's really, you know, aerated and drains well. So you definitely want to, yeah. If you have a flat area, you don't just want to put plants in a flat area. You want to either build these with wood frames or build them with their with your own. But you want to get things up and yeah, up off the ground, at least a foot, you know, or they're going to drown when it rains. So now I'm going to play a video of like how that actually looks like to actually build some of this.
It's the Imperfect Gardener here, working out in a cloudy day, here to show you how to rake your rows up into raised beds. Not all those wooden raised beds things. I'm talking about raised beds like this in the garden. Okay, so here's how I do it for me. That's what the garden looks like after I've tilled it with my rototiller. And then I come over here and I start on one end and I start raking the soil and rake it into a pile, okay? All the way down, start here, go all the way down, down there, raking it into pile. And then you flatten it on top and you got this big raised bed like this, okay? What it's done is it's, I could show you this part. This one's flattened out already. Down there it's not. You see how it's a big hill? That's because that's where I just raked it. And if you start on the right side of it as you're going, then you'll be standing on the part that you already took the soil out of right here. You're standing here and raking now. I already raked this dirt over to here. So now I'm raking the dirt over here that wasn't stepped on yet. Rake it up into the pile over here and just go down the row and just keep raking that up into the pile, which is really difficult to show you while I am holding this. I need to get my other camera out here, but whatever. So rake it into this pile. And then you just take your rake like so. Let's see if I can get behind it here. And take that and you just pull your rake along and flatten it out. To kind of do a little back and forth motion. Let me see if I can show you if I can get back far enough from my rake. Okay, so I'm taking the rake, pulling the dirt. It takes two hands really, and I'm using one right now. But you just flatten it out along until you have this flat top that you see all the way down there and on this row over here. Basically, why do I do this? Well, it's wonderful, that's why. It gives me this soil right here is raised up from the ground right here more than it would be otherwise. So now when I put my plants in here in this raised area, they've got this much more space of really nice tilled up fertile earth to grow down into. They're also raised up so if there's a lot of rain, the water is going to go down in and they're not going to get waterlogged at all. They won't be sitting in water. They're up high so they won't be sitting in water. It helps that. I've also found it helpful for my carrots, for example, because carrots need to dig down and have loose earth. So now I've got the earth I tilled originally, and then I've got earth on top of the earth I tilled. So that soil that I put on top of the soil I already tilled, now instead of just having about 4 inches for my carrot to grow, I've actually going to be about 8 inches of nice soil. Now in some areas like this one over here, it's not as high. It's over on the edge. And the stuff I'm planting, I'm not that worried about. So having really, really deep. But my carrots, I'll put in one that's nice and high like this. This one is only up about 2 inches. This one is more 3 or 4 inches higher than the rest of the earth here. And I don't need to put, a wood around it or anything to keep it from going down. The first year I did this, I thought, "Cow, if I make it this high," the first year I did it, I made them all this size of the one way down here, pretty low. My brother told me to do it up a couple inches. Another year, my son made them really high like this, and I thought, that's just going to erode away with water. That's just going to all be gone. but it doesn't. It actually stays in place really nicely. You end up having the flat part on the top here, real flat. And then if you can see, it is a gradual incline that's going down right here. It's a little bit, going down. It's not like just a straight thing. It goes down at a little angle such that this doesn't erode away hardly at all. Once in a while, I'll get a spot where it starts to erode if the sprinkler hit it in the wrong way, and then I just push a little dirt back into there and it's fine. But normally not a problem at all. And so that's how I like to do it.
All right, so I can attest to that. Yeah, I've been doing this for a while, and they do not. These rows don't erode. They hold their shape pretty well throughout the year. I mean, I bet if you left them alone for a couple years, they would erode. But as long as you're doing gardening every year, they're fine. So a couple questions. Let's see. Okay, so if you're building wood frames, how tall are they typically? 2 feet, 1 feet? Typically 1 foot, but we're going to talk about raised beds in a second. So I'll talk about the different options. Uh, Another person said, has anyone put in a really high raised bed, like 3 feet tall? My back and knees have a lot of complaints about leaning over and kneeing. Yeah, you can, but that's going to take an enormous amount of soil. So what people actually do is they build what's called tabletop gardens, where they'll have legs that they'll be 2 or 3 feet tall, and then you'll have a foot. I think I'll show you a picture of that, what it looks like. But that's way better than in building like a 3 feet tall bed, because you're going to drop hundreds of dollars on the soil. So another question. Yes, I have a high bed with bench seat on each side. Yep. And then someone's responded to, saying, I saw some from Home Depot that looked like they were on stilts. Yeah, that's a tabletop. I'll show you a picture about that. And then the last, so are raised beds incompatible with double digging? No. Raised beds are actually really great. You would want to double dig and then do raised beds, because not only are you going to get a foot tall here, this person only does 4 inches, and that's fine. You just do what you can. But I try to get my beds about a foot tall, but then they'll have a foot or two deep of nice tilled. So it's really beautiful. So you could have 2 to 3 feet of great soil for your roots. And then and also whenever I do like raised beds with wood, I'll always like dig out the bottom first until the bottom before I add my soil, so it'll get, so definitely no, they work together. They're compatible. All right, so now we have garden beds. So like I was saying, like a lot of people like growing in the ground because, one, it's cheap, it's easier. At least the setup is easier. It's not easier like overall, and you can grow a lot more, for sure. You can grow a lot more in ground, but at the same time, you need to know what you're doing, and it could be hard. Like if you get really harsh rain, it could be a nightmare, as opposed to a raised bed, which harsh rain is just going to be wonderful for your bed. So it's really up to you. I mean, but raised beds, they cost a little bit. They cost more money. They're a little more work up front. But then once you have them, and once you have them full of soil, it's super easy gardening from there. So it's really up to you how you're feeling. If you're a first time gardener, I maybe would think about raised beds first, and then like move up towards in ground. But some of the things you want to think about, like I used to fill up raised beds with 50-50 compost and topsoil, but then the compost every year just disappears. It breaks down or sucked up, and then you're left with a half empty raised bed, and you got to haul all this stuff in. So what I do is I do like 90% topsoil at least. I'll fill it up almost to the top, and then get a couple bags of compost and mix it in. And that works great, and it doesn't disappear, and you only have to fill it once. And then every year I just buy a couple bags of compost, which is great. This is a great example of like a tabletop raised bed. I mean, you can do all different kinds. You can put them on wheels. You can, but the idea is you want to get them as high as you want. And then you still want to have a foot. You always want to have at least a foot, unless you're just doing some herbs and stuff, which we'll talk about, container gardening, if you're doing smaller plants like herbs and like certain things don't, like strawberries only need a couple inches, but most plants want at least a foot of soil. So you still want to do a foot, you just want to put it on legs. And you could, there's a lot of different ways you can make them more accessible, and they warm up quicker. So a lot of times reason why we're waiting to like mid-March or even April 1st to plant our cool weather is we need the soil to be a certain temperature for plants to grow or germinate. But when they're up above the ground, they warm up a lot quicker than in the ground. So we're gonna really dive deeply into this in our carpentry class about all the different really step by step of building raised beds. But I was just gonna go over quick about some of the things to think about. Like I was saying, like it's nice when you build a raised bed and then don't just fill it up with soil. Till the soil below and then fill it up with soil. Unless it's like bad soil or it's toxic, then maybe get some landscape fabric. Some kind of something that's allows water to drain but still kind of divides the two area. But that's one way. Typically people you don't want the raised bed to be more than 4 feet wide, or I mean, if it's like a 10 foot by 10 foot, you just can't reach into the middle. So you want to have like most people do 4 by 8s because 4 feet is great. 8 feet, anything longer than 8, it's going to start bowing unless it's like 4 by 4s or 6 by 4s, 6 by 6s. But if you're doing like a 2 by like a 2 by 12 or something, like 2-inch wide boards, you don't want to go more than 8 feet or it's going to start bowing the sides. It's a good idea to get some like a tree stake and chop it up in little pieces and then screw them in the corners. That's going to give you a lot of stability. It's going to and it's going to make your bed last a lot longer. I would not do anything below 2 inches thick. A lot of people will do 1-inch thick beds because they're super cheap, but they won't last more than like 2 years. If you do 2-inch beds, like 2 by 12s, you'll get about 5 years out of that before you need to start replacing it. If you do 4 by 4s and 6 by 6s, then it's a lot more expensive up front, but it'll last you like 30, 40, 50 years. So it's really it's a lot. We'll go over numbers in a second, but so that's typically, yeah. Like I said, we'll talk all about like step by step and how to build it during the carpentry class. But there's a lot of stuff. Like this is untreated pine, 2-inch boards. So this will probably last about 5 years, and then you'll have to replace it. You could do treated wood. The treated wood these days, they used to use arsenic. You definitely don't want to use arsenic. You don't want to use old lumber from a salvage yard that you don't know where it's from because it might have arsenic. But anything after like the 90s. It uses copper, a micronized copper, which is it's fine. But at the same like when you're working with it, it's wet. You want to wash your hands off. You don't want to lick that stuff because it's going to make you a little sick. I mean, it's not going to kill you, but it's going to make you a little sick. But then it may leach out into the soil, and then copper is a fungicide, so it's going to naturally just kill any kind of beneficial fungus you have in there. Again, it's not a huge problem. They'll come back. It doesn't leach that much. But if you don't want that, you could just get some kind of liner, a food grade liner. Like check out Aquaponics has really great food grade liners. And you could just staple that in and then fill it up with soil. And then I love 4 by 4s and 6 by 6s. You use these timber locks to put them together. You can sit on the side, to garden. We build them like we build our bed's like 3 6 by 6s, so it's like 1.5 feet tall, so it's a perfect height to just kind of sit on the side and do your gardening. Don't have to worry about bending over so much. And then cedar is really fantastic. It's like it has like a natural fungicide, so it lasts a long time. It's just super expensive. It could be like 3 5 10 times as expensive as all this stuff. Which, speaking of which, I won't spend too much time on this slide. This is more for your reference. And all these slides are shareable. If you haven't found these slides yet, just email me. I'll send you a link. This is just some pricing. Again, pricing is different every year. Like especially wood. Wood's actually been going up lately. Wood's getting more and more expensive. Some kind of, I don't know, market stuff I don't understand, but so it's but I did these pricing like a couple years ago, so give or take. But I gave a lot of options where if you want to do kiln dried, like this kind of wood with no pressure treated, you're going to need $40 of this wood, to make a 4 foot by 8 foot bed that's 1 foot tall. If you want to do the same thing with pressure treated, it's 51. Same thing with cedar, it's 160. Got corner pieces and brackets. If you do 4 by 4s, there's some pricing here. Like cedar 4 by 4s are super expensive. This is cedar. Pressure treated is the one that's got green tint into it, where they pressurize copper, liquid copper. That's why it's green and it's wet. So you have different pricing here, and then you got to think about hardware, how you're going to put them together. If you're doing 4 by 4s or 6 by 6s, you need these like big timber locks. If you're doing 2 by 2s, you can use, I love these deck mates, these outdoor screws. But really, what gets you is the soil. You need to think about the soil, because if you're only doing 1 or 2 raised beds, you're probably going to buy the soil by the bag, and that could be, a 4 by 8 by foot tall bed needs 32 cubic feet of soil, or about 1 cubic yard. And that's like, I mean, that's usually like, I mean, most bags are like, cubic foot or so that's like 32 bags you gotta fill, so that's a lot to move. That's a lot, it's pretty expensive. It could be like another $100 for soil. If you buy it by the bulk soil, it's cheaper, but you need to find people to go in with you. Like if you have a couple neighbors that want to go in with you can order it bulk. I mean, you can get 30 cubic yards, for you can get a cubic yard for like $30, as opposed to spending like $100 for a cubic yard in bags. And then, but the delivery is like, that's what it gets you, is these big dump trucks. It's like $75 to $100 delivery fee. So you just got to kind of like, you got to call around and price this stuff out. And the pricing is different every year. So it's a little frustrating. But like I said, I would recommend filling doing complete, filling your bed up completely, almost to the top with topsoil, and then just throw a couple bags of compost into it. But ideally, you could spend some more time, going through these numbers. But what I'm trying to show here is you can build a raised bed with soil and wood and the hardware for about $150. Or you can, you could build a nice 6x6 cedar raised bed for up to like $1,000. So there's a lot of different options here. So like I said, this is for your reference. Don't feel like you need to absorb all of this right now. But it just gives you some options. And then there's a lot of alternative materials, it's recycled plastic lumber, metal, which metal's great, but it heats up in the summer, which is fine. You just got to water more. It dries your soil out quicker. Wood logs, they're only going to last like a year or two before they rot. Concrete blocks, don't use cinder blocks because they have fly ash as a heavy metal in it. Use concrete blocks. And yeah, I love like the paver, like if people are talking about like, like if you have mobility issues, do 2 concrete blocks high and then put a nice, smooth paver stone seating. So you have this nice bench you could sit and just do your gardening really easily. Or you leave them open and put like garlic and things like that. And there's Langdon again. We've already talked about Langdon though. And then like critter proof. So we're gonna have a whole class on critters. So, but these are just some things like if you have like mole, gophers and stuff that like to dig holes underneath, you could put hardware cloth. Hardware cloth's like super duper chicken wire. It's either 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch. But you could put like, you can line the bottom with it. Most people don't do this. I know like Washington Youth Garden, they have a lot of gophers out there. They're in the National Arboretum. So they lined all their beds with hardware cloth, to prevent the gophers from going underneath. There's netting for birds, but netting's like problematic. You get all kinds of things stuck in netting. These low tunnels with harbor cloth. We'll talk about how to make all this stuff. If you have deer, you can do these like, this is the best thing for deer. It's like this little motion sensor spray, gopher spikes and stuff. Like I said, we're gonna have a whole class on critters. So we're gonna go really in deep on what to do. But like, yeah, that's like squirrels and deer are like the 2 worst things in DC, right? If you're a gardener. And then we'll talk about how to make critter proof cages and stuff. But we'll talk more about that during the carpentry class. And then you can get these like organic, if you want to use finishes that will preserve your wood a little bit longer, make sure it's 100% organic, use tongue or linseed. You may buy a couple years. I don't know. I don't think they're really worth it, but some people do. So definitely do the research first, but just make sure it's either tongue or linseed, which is organic. So this again is more about slope. It's nice having some kind of level. So when you install your raised beds, put a level on it. Make sure your raised beds are leveled. Even if you're on a slope, you may have to dig out the bottom, to get your raised bed level, and that's fine. But you won't, if it's not level, like if it's downhill, when you water it, everything's just going to wash downhill. So really, like if you're doing raised beds, get a level and really, put some effort into digging out the corners and stuff and trying to make it as level as possible. Container gardening, we're gonna have a whole class on container gardening. So for sure, we're gonna dive really deeply into this stuff. So I'm not going to spend any time on this tonight, but that's just one option for raised beds. And then watering system. Think about different ways to water. the less pressure, the better. Like getting like this nozzle that you can pick, shower or mist, like these wands are really nice. If you don't want to like, spray super, hard water, it's just going to wash away your soil. If you got seedlings, use some really great, gradual like spray bottle or a wand. Drip irrigation and soaker hoses and stuff. We'll talk about in a second. You can even like, these DIY ones where you bury like a terracotta pot. Terracotta has porosity to it where it actually will leach out water. So you could bury a terracotta pot and fill it with water and go on vacation for a week, and it will slowly slowly water your garden over, like a day or two. You can do the same with, plastic bottles and stuff. If you want to go into drip irrigation, if you want to go super, super simple, this is awesome because you don't, you still want to check it every once in a while, but yeah, especially in our summers are nasty. So, if you got like a timer, when you do drip irrigation, so I'm just going to do a really brief 2-minute talk about drip irrigation, but we actually have a recorded hour-long class from the new Department of Energy and Environment Urban Ag Director, Kate Lee. She does an awesome irrigation class. So you check it out at this link if you want to learn more. Drip is really nice. It's just, it's kind of expensive. Like you could drop a couple $100 to set it up. But once you do, it'll last a long time. The idea is you get it on like you gotta get backflow valves and filters and stuff, and then you eventually get on a timer, and then it's just and then it just turns on the timer whenever and waters with these drip hoses or soaker hoses, or I even like put like sprinklers. I'll use sprinklers sometimes, if I don't have the money for this drip, and just put it on the timer, and so it's just it just waters it on the timer. Again, you need to be constantly checking to make sure that it's actually watering and nothing's like messed with and stuff, but these are really nice. And if you go to Drip Depot, you can actually order a whole kit. So you don't need to know exactly what you need. You can just order a kit. They have a kit for raised beds. They have a kit for in ground, things like that. And then they'll send you everything you need. So you don't need to get, you don't need to be an expert before you order it. But the biggest thing is you want to avoid overwatering. This is probably like the main thing that kills plants. You think it's underwatering, but I see more plants die from overwatering. And because it kind of looks the same sometimes. Like overwatering, you'll get these brown tips, and it'll get get droopy, very similar to underwatering plants. A telltale sign is that brown tips, and it's not as hanging as underwatering. But really, you want to do a finger check whenever you're about to water. Put your finger in the first 2 inches, and if it's still moist 2 to 3 inches down there, if it's really wet, you don't want to water. If it's moist, but not that wet, you can water, especially if you're going to be gone the next day. But ideally, you want to wait till like the top, it starts drying out a little bit before you put more water in. You don't want to wait till it's completely dry, because then you might, underwater your plants. But you just want to you want to make sure you're not drowning your plants. So a good way, just check that soil. If it's already really wet, skip the watering that day. And then there's I spent a whole day, a really depressing day, going through all the garden safe materials. Unfortunately, there's a study that tested all these hoses, because hoses aren't regulated by the Clean Water Act. So you can have a hose that says, "Oh, this is clean and everything, drinkable," but no one's like double checking that. So this isn't to say that you gotta go out and throw out your hoses, but if you have just a normal crappy hose, what you want to do, a lot of hoses have like some toxic stuff that will leach out. It's not bad. It can accumulate over time. It's not going to kill you, but it's not, if you're trying to have an organic garden, you don't want that. So a couple things you could do. One, they tend to leach out when they're left in the sun with some water inside. So one way, if you have a bad hose, old hose, don't throw it away. Just make sure it's not in the sun. As long as it's not in the sun, because sun breaks down plastic stuff, you're fine. You're never, it's not going to, and then when you're ready for a new hose, buy a more, safe hose. But Also, yeah, another thing too is when you turn your water on, if there is water in that hose, just flush it out on your grass for like 5 seconds, like a couple seconds. And so if there is anything that leached out, if it was in the sun and water, that the combo, you'll flush it out in your grass and then water your garden with after like a couple seconds, it's pure water. But when you're ready for a new hose, you want a hose that has has polyurethane. There's a lot of different plastics we'll talk about in our container garden class, because you really need to understand containers, the type of plastics and the numbers they have. But polyurethane is a really stable plastic that doesn't leach anything out. So you try to find that. Nickel plated, the couplings. If there's brass couplings, you can have a little bit of lead that comes out of those, but nickel plated ones are pretty safe. This is the best hose I've ever found that's like the cleanest, the Gator Hide. I don't know if they went out of business, or I just haven't been able to find any in the last year. But if you could find these hoses, these are amazing hoses, and they're like definitely 100% drinkable. So you can drink straight from this hose. Rubber hoses are typically really good, but with rubber hoses, they get hot and they start melting on your hands, and so I don't really like rubber hoses. And then there's other hoses that are good. You just, like I said, don't keep your hose in the sun all day, and then or if you do, flush it out for a couple seconds and then water. And then we talked about like first flush systems and stuff, if you're collecting rainwater. All right, so there's a couple questions. Are terracotta watering spikes effective? I don't really know what a watering spike is. Is that where you bury them in the ground?
Yeah, Josh, I've used those for like indoor plants, and you soak it in water for like 10-15 minutes. And then you fill it with water, you put this cap on it, you stick it in the soil, and then there's a little hose that runs to like a pot of water. And like when the water pulls out of the like clay stake, then it pulls more from that bigger pot of water. So it just keeps watering itself.
Oh, I don't really know that. Can you put a link to that in the chat?
Yeah. I've never used it for gardens though. Like the biggest issue would be that the water could evaporate faster than it would in your house.
Okay.
But it's pretty cool. I'll drop a link in the chat.
Cool. Thank you. All right, last section. So we just have a couple more slides. We should be done in like another 10 minutes. Garden design. So we're not going to go really deep into designing the layout of your garden. We're going to talk about the layout and stuff. When to plant what and how to match them. We'll talk about that next week. We're just going to talk about orientation and the styles of how to design a garden. Orientation is big because typically, like I said, the sun rises in the east, travels in the south, and then sets in the west. But you got all these plants that are different sizes, and they all like sun. So like typically what people do is like stadium seating, where you have the small stuff in the south side, your medium stuff in the middle, and then your tall stuff in the back. And that's great. Everything gets enough sun when you do that. But also you can kind of you can get creative with that. If you reverse that and put tomatoes in the front, and then use things that like cool weather crops that made bolt in the summer. But if you give it a little bit of shade, it'll do fine. So you plant like a front row of tomatoes, and then plant like lettuces and stuff. The lettuces aren't supposed to grow in the summer, but if you get, you plant it behind a row of tomatoes and water it really heavily, you can grow lettuce all summer. So you can get really creative on how do if you want to grow cool weather stuff in the summer, just plant them behind tall stuff. I mean, you want them to get some sunlight, but you want to, like a partial shade kind of stuff. Think about windbreaks are really important, especially in the winter. That's really what's going to kill your plants if you're doing winter gardens is the winter winds. But also, winds can really mess up your garden. So think about some way to break up that wind, whether it's like this, wicker, fence, straw bales, or really like what I like to do is I like to plant a lot of perennial plants on the outside. Like I'll plant berry bushes and rosemary. And perennial means that they come back every year. As an annual is like you have to plant you have to reseed things every year. Like tomatoes, an annual of rosemary is a perennial. So I plant big stuff like grapes and berries and herbs, perennial herbs on the perimeter of my garden. So when there's a strong wind, those plants are, especially perennials, are pretty used to. I mean, after a couple of years, they're really great at like dealing with bad winds. So they'll break up that wind, so you'll still get some wind because you want some circulation. That's going to help with fungal issues, but you just don't want a really bad wind tearing up your garden. So think about different ways just to break up that wind, not block it completely, but break it up. And then I believe this is the last thing we're going to talk about is so you have two options when you're planting. Probably more, but I'm just going to talk about these two. You could either plant your in rows, which a lot of people do that. Typically plant in rows. Or there's a thing called square foot gardening that we'll talk about in a second. Planting in rows, if you want to, don't eyeball your row. It's impossible to get like some string, some cheap twine, some sticks, popsicle sticks or whatever, and map out your row along with a string. So then once you have that string, you can use that as a guideline to you can start digging up that row, planting it, raking it up, things like that. You can use popsicle sticks are great. They have these plastic ones that you can I thought they were done for once you write once, but you can actually take a razor blade and shave off that word and then rewrite on them. So if you want to reuse your plastic ones over and over again. But that's typical ways, like you map out the rows and then you plant along the rows along the string. Try to stagger them. The ultimate goal is you want to have the least amount of soil exposed. So if you plant them in this perfect symmetrical thing, way, you got all this exposed area. But if you stagger them, you can fit more crops and they can grow more healthier. But then you have square foot gardening. So this is good for like a new gardeners. I think it's a great way to learn about spacing. But after you do it once or twice, I did it for like once or twice, and then I was ready to go back to rows. But I mean, I learned a lot by doing this. This guy wrote this book, Square Foot Gardening. It's all about this like it's an easy way to he's got these system to decide. He divides his garden up into these square foots, and then he has this whole chart like he knows one cabbage will fit in the square foot, 9 green beans will fit here, 1 pepper will fit here, or if you're doing a big plant like an artichoke, you need 4 squares. So it's a great, and he's got a whole chart, all these things will fit. I mean, you'll need to trellis this stuff. Like you can't just put a tomato in the square foot and then let it grow on the ground. You got to trellis it up and prune it and all that stuff, which we'll talk about next class. But these things only need 1 square foot. These things, you could put 4, per square foot, 16. And then you got big things that are going to need more than a square foot. So it's not a perfect system for sure. Like you're going to, it's definitely not a science, exact science. But I mean, but if you're new and you want to learn about a good way to space things, I would definitely recommend starting out with this. It's a good way to really understand the spacing in gardens. And then you can you use strings, you can use landscape fabric, wood, whatever you need to do to space out your gardens in the square foots. And that's basically it. So there's a bunch of other gardens here, books if you want to learn more about building and designing gardens. But like I said, next class we're gonna dive deeper into like how to design things based on plants, and then we're gonna talk about how to plant things, how to maintain things, how to harvest things and things like that. So yeah, cool. Well, I could stick around for a while if anyone's got any questions. But if not, y'all